This is Scott Becker with the Becker Business and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. This next 30-minute podcast was a session on AI practical business use cases. The section includes Brett Jansen, Amanda Verner Thompson, and David Friedman. The three sponsors of the webinar that day, Com Advisors, Craig Levy, GoFig, Nathan Freystetter, and Panther Capital, an investor in AI and technology companies, and David Friedman. I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Becker Business and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. So with that, let's kick this off. And this is our first section on artificial intelligence, practical business use cases. Amanda, let me ask you to take a moment and introduce yourself.
Great. Thank you, Scott. I'm Amanda Verner Thompson, founder and CEO of Madison Advisory AI. I've spent about 2 decades of my life as a healthcare services investment banker, helping organizations in M&A transactions, capital raising, as well as strategic advisory. More recently, I founded Madison Advisory AI, which really sits at the intersection of that advisory experience and AI-enabled execution. The thesis really being that AI is most powerful when paired with seasoned judgment, and not substituting for it. And that's the lens I'll bring to this conversation.
Amanda, thank you so much. Brett, can you take a second and introduce yourself and tell the audience what you do?
Of course. My name's Brett Jansen. I've spent about 16 years in healthcare, primarily enterprise sales and marketing. I was an individual contributor at Cerner, did 2 rounds at Optum, and then also was a part of the team that took Butterfly Network public. Since then, I run Brett Jansen AI as well as Health Tech House, which is a go-to market agency for startups. But my work, very complementary to what Amanda said, AI is much best use when you have expertise in the loop. So I'm excited to dig into these topics today and share how I'm helping clients as well as quite a few of the private equity firms that I'm working with to apply AI into their sales, marketing, and product teams.
Thank you so much. And David, you're the founder of Panther Capital. I've known you for a long time. Okay. You've been in AI and the technology space before anybody was in it. Talk to us a little bit about yourself and what you do and what you're doing with Panther Capital.
Yeah, sure. So Panther's a venture firm. We started in early stage tech way back in the early 2000s. Still continue to invest in early stage tech through OCA Ventures, which is a firm here in Chicago. About 15 years ago, we got involved in the cannabis industry, but we stayed within the technology space. As a venture investor, I've dropped into 40, 50 different companies over the last 30 years as an interim C-suite executive, primarily CFO, CIO. And the last 5 to 7 years, I've been heavily involved in technology and automation and AI. About 3 weeks ago, I retired from my last operating role, and I continue to consult with my portfolio companies on AI strategy, as well as some select non-portfolio companies, but generally speaking, kind of semi-retired.
No, congratulations. I've watched your career and fantastic, and I appreciate the support very much. Amanda, let me start with you, and we'll go around the horn on the first question. Sort of, where are you starting to see people practically deploy AI, where they're actually seeing real value? What's working? And then I'm going to ask each of you how a mid-sized company, a smaller company, or a large company can get started in really implementing AI and what they should be thinking about. But Amanda, let me start with you. Where do you see practical use cases? And then Brett and David will ask you to comment on that too.
Sure. And I'm going to take this from a advisory perspective and healthcare perspective, because that's where I spend most of my time. But I think one of the most practical real-world use cases is research and synthesis of information. What takes an analyst, and I can speak to this because I was an analyst about 2 decades ago, days of work pulling together comps or industry context or overviews of targets and summaries can now be done in merely hours, which gives the senior advisor much more context and more time to really develop their thought process against or with that. And then when it comes to M&A healthcare transactions, they are so document intensive. So a lot of the due diligence review, compliance documentation, and the like has really been condensed using a lot of AI strategies. And then the last portion I'll speak to, which I think a lot of us are using, maybe it's underrated, is client-facing communication. A lot of times senior advisors spend a lot of hours diluting complex situations into easily understandable text. And that the first draft of that can now be done with AI, which leaves a lot of extra time for the senior advisor to dive into the nuanced details of their specific work. So I think really the common thread of practical use cases for AI is where there's high volume structured work that's very well defined. And I think all the panelists will likely speak to this. The more defined the work is, the better use case for AI. And when it comes to nuanced judgment and that overlayer of human interaction, that's where the human is needed most.
And let me ask you a question, because you mentioned something about analyst work and was recently speaking to an investment banker who said at their investment bank, and a large bank thought that maybe a third of analyst roles or more wouldn't be needed within 5 years because so much of the early analysis, the early breaking down of stuff would be done instead of by a junior analyst by AI, but you'd still need a lot of bright analysts, but not as many. Is that something that you think is coming, or how do you see that?
Well, I've had a lot of conversations surrounding this lately, and I don't want to be a fear monger because I do think AI augments people and it's not taking away a lot. But when it comes to investment banking, I think that our analysts entering the workforce will have a much greater experience than those that were doing it 20 years ago, because you'll have more time to really think about the whys behind your work. That being said, so I think you can grow into a senior banker much more quickly. However, I do think less analysts will be needed as a whole for firms to develop because the workflow will be quicker and it will be more streamlined. So you won't need quite as many.
And Brett, you're working with a ton of firms to help them implement AI strategies. Where are you seeing the practical use cases that people at small, mid-sized companies and larger can put to work and sort of a bigger level versus just somebody going into ChatGPT for a quick something? Where are people putting AI to work?
Yeah, I mean, I would put it into three categories. I think Amanda spoke to it already in terms of using it to time compress knowledge work and just synthesize multiple data points and, dumb it down or simplify it in a way that's easier to digest. But from a practical perspective, I'm working with a lot of organizations, and instead of me coming in and saying, let's deploy, Claude across the organization, I first start with, where are the bottlenecks in the organization, whether it's sales or marketing, where you're spending a lot of manual time that is taking away from revenue generating activities? So, right now, obviously we're entering Q2, and these enterprise deals specifically in healthcare, but outside of healthcare, where the sales cycles anywhere from, 6 months to a year, it would be impossible for an individual human being or even a team of sales leaders to ingest all the information, call notes, what have you presented to the client? What was their feedback? So what I do is I come in to help organizations and I say, let's pull all your call transcripts, all your email communication with this client. What have you pitched to them? What has been the communication with them? Let's tie that in with market intel, competitive intelligence, and synthesize it to help the deal accelerate. Because we uncover a lot of really insightful things. Hey, 9 months ago, CFO said this, you guys haven't addressed this again. You address it at that point in time, but now that the deal is stalled and perhaps we're stuck in procurement, it's an opportunity for us to elevate something that would be a win for the CFO based on all of the data that we've curated and synthesized using AI. We start to surface some really great intelligence to help sales leaders and, CEOs, to be honest, to move deals forward. I would also say for the private equity groups that I'm working with, they're looking to figure out how can we help our portfolio companies to have some quick wins. Everyone's wanting to deploy AI all at once, but instead of, like I said, coming in and saying, let's just do it, let's find very specific use cases within each team. Let's deploy it there, make sure that the teams understand how to use it, how to prompt effectively, and then you expand versus just stacking it on.
But talk about that exactly, because I was on a call today with somebody who's raising money for a fund where the fund is involved in trying to, across the portfolio of private equity funded companies, to make sure that they're utilizing AI. And that's part of the thesis, that they're going to make a difference in the investments by making sure they're applying AI. And you talk about something that's near and dear to all of our hearts, is where do you find those easy wins? Because so many people talking about it. There's a huge difference between sort of people using it one-off versus a bigger enterprise level. But where can you start to get wins that feel meaningful, so that somebody gets more excited about using it more? Where do you see some of those early wins?
Honestly, it's a lot of investigative work. I come in and do an audit with the leadership team. I'll spend a lot of time with the individual department heads, and I'll do almost like an interview like this and say, walk me through a day in the life of what your reps do, or walk me through a day in the life of what your product marketing team does. And we literally map out the responsibilities, the tasks, and we identify things that are just really dragging the team down, such as, putting together materials for a board presentation. Like, everyone knows that takes a lot of time and effort. How can we cut that down so you can get a good ROI that's tangible using AI versus just adding it to your tech stack without any sort of use case to tie the ROI back to?
Let me ask you a question on that, because people putting together board presentation decks or pitch decks, at one point, and still people spend a ton of time, in some companies, the cadence of board meetings is insane. And then they're spending a ton of time revising decks. Often you get an 80-page deck that nobody really reads, or very few people do. How do you turn that into an AI-driven exercise versus so much people time?
Yeah.
And then how do you cut down to the top 7 issues that somebody has to talk about? Can that be done by AI, or do you still need a person to use their judgment to combine sort of the?
Yeah. Very simple. And I want to give David an opportunity to respond, but set up a project in Claude and make sure it's compliant with your IT department and all the things. Upload your latest board deck, upload anything that your board members are asking you for, market intel, what is your revenue target, anything that's material to the board, and use it to help you drive what the next board deck needs to look like. Claude has the ability now to create and generate PowerPoints as long as you are prompting it effectively. So, my clients come to me because they're like, we spent 2 weeks building this deck out. Can you clean it up? I'm turning it back around in an hour, because
Right.
I've just gotten really good at fine tuning the prompt within Claude, but I keep it within the context of the project, along with many other materials that my clients give me. So the LLM has the right information to pull out the right insights that would be applicable to an audience of board members, investors, whether it's private equity or VC, because those two channels are looking for different things in their board materials. So I think just making sure that you're confining it within a project is incredibly important, and an opportunity that's missed by a lot of leaders that I start to work with.
And David, let me ask you to switch to you. Your practical use cases that you're seeing, and then I'll also ask you to prompt on the second question, which is companies that deploy technology effectively versus those that don't. And similarly with artificial intelligence, you've done this across 30 to 50 companies. What do you see in terms of people utilizing AI effectively? And then what do you see as differentiators in companies that actually deploy technology effectively versus those that get stuck sort of experimenting or messing around, but don't really get the benefit of better uses of technology?
Yeah, I think I have a pretty similar approach to Brett. I tend to know my CEOs a little bit better, although as I move outside of my portfolio companies, I'm experiencing some very similar, sort of processes as Brett is. But I start at the top, what is slowing you down? Obviously, sales is always the number one goal in an organization, but generally speaking, if you talk to a sales team, they don't ever complain about the rest of the salespeople. They complain about operations. They complain about, finance not approving credit quickly enough, right? So what are the real bottlenecks within the organization? What are the things that are keeping the CEO up at night? Who are the key people within the organization that are the gatekeepers around this information? And then get a sort of an overall picture for how all of this stuff is really potentially impacting the organization. But then I go back to, I think the a combination of the first and second question here, it comes down to really understanding what is AI. Most people don't even understand what AI is. In reality, most of us, save, I don't know who's on this call, right? But unless you're really advanced, most of us are just using AI as an automation tool. All it's doing is allowing us to complete our work faster. It's allowing us to use a computer to execute tasks that humans used to execute. It takes a while to get to actual artificial intelligence where the machine is acting autonomously. And so, when I first started out and I just compiled this, I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me the top 100 terms that I need to know to understand what AI is. And I just posted that on my website, and then I went and I said, give me the top 50 tools that are, the AI tools, and how do I use them? And then I work with the people that are within my group to try to get them to understand what are the resources that you have available within the organization? What are the resources that you personally have available? How do you learn? Are you a visual learner? Are you somebody who needs to sit in a classroom? Are you somebody who likes to listen to audio, right? And as you can start to learn and understand what the terms are within AI and what the tools are within AI, then you can start to apply it to your daily use cases. Very simple use cases. Last week I signed up for about 8 or 9 AI newsletters because I really want to understand what's going on. Stuff is changing so fast. Claude comes out with this, and then my inbox was just inundated with newsletters. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, okay, use the color tone of my website, take all of these newsletters and compile them into a news feed for me. And I want you to send it to me at 6 a.m. every morning. So when I get up while I'm drinking my coffee, I can read all of the headlines. And the headlines tell me whether or not I want to dig into something. And it tells me, hey, this headline was seen on 5 different newsletters. This headline was seen only here, right? And it differentiates the national news, Reuters and TechCrunch from Shelley Palmer and some of the other, prognosticators out there. And that's just one real simple use case. It probably saved me 4 hours this week over last week, right? So what are the things that I can do that I can treat the machine the way that I treat a human being? What's nice is if I don't answer them, they don't complain. When I come back, they know exactly where we left off. All I have to do is reprompt it and tell it I want to start again. Or if I've changed my mind, it doesn't get mad. If I ask it to repeat itself, it doesn't get mad. Those types of things really make an impact on your day-to-day life. And if you can utilize AI in that way, then you can start to move to some more advanced techniques. We built, one of my companies is a flavor company, and we have flavorists on staff. These are PhDs with, multiple $100,000 a year salaries. We started building an agent that replicates the knowledge that the flavorists have and all of the FDA regulations. And so when you go in and you want to create a flavor for a cannabis vape pen versus a beer or for something else, it knows what you can and can't use in terms of ingredients. Now, is it commercially viable just now? No. Has it replaced the entire flavor staff? No, and it never will. But it's significantly cut down on the amount of time that my high value flavorists are spending answering basic questions. That's an advanced use case. It took us 3 months to build that and to train it and have the human in the loop until you got to a point where we trusted it to step back and say, okay, we're not going to verify every question that comes in, but that's a more advanced, but it took us many months to just learn how to understand how to use AI and the AI tools that were out there before we could get there.
Thank you. Let me ask you this question. In terms of somebody had asked the question about sales and business development, developing leads for sales, developing leads for business development. And what is the experience there? Let me ask you each of that question. David, let me start there. Sales, business development, where do you see AI business use cases? Is it still like a lot of things with that final mile, like logistics, that final mile is going to still be very, very human in terms of closing or really getting to the right person and really making things happen? Where are you starting to see AI with sales and business development? And then I'm going to ask Amanda and Madison and Brett the same question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the product and the service that you're selling, right? But on both sides, outbound as well as inbound, I've seen AI make significant advancements. So, one example is we subscribe to a market research product, and we're able to pull the data from that market research product into our data lake, and on a weekly basis, we go into that research database, and using the agent, we're able to determine 10 qualified leads per salesperson. And then we're able to go out to the internet, we're able to grab the information from their website, and we're able to grab information from Zoom Info or whatever other tools are out there to help identify, okay, here's the right person, here's the right organization, here's how they're using our product, here's who, whatever competitive intelligence we can gather, and that posts it right in HubSpot. And the leads sitting in the HubSpot inbox when they come in on Monday morning, and they have to get through those 10 leads. And then they tell us how the quality of those leads were, and we go back and, we help the agent sort of figure that out. But on the flip side, when we have inbound leads coming in, we have a workflow that routes it through a customer service agent. That customer service agent answers the questions and can take it all the way through the order process if it doesn't require a human in the loop. At some point in time, 60% still require human in the loop, right, to close a deal. You're not closing a $200,000 software deal with an AI agent today. I think you will in 5 years, but today I don't think you will. But selling products over the internet, closing small dollar software application, platform, onboarding, we're seeing that stuff get done all the time.
But that's really right. The smaller transaction stuff may get done now automatically with AI help and so forth. But Amanda, let me ask you that question. Sales and business development, where are you seeing AI? And then secondly, which business functions are most likely to transform with AI over the next 2 to 5 years?
So in terms of sales and business development, I am seeing a lot of AI in terms of lead generation. And I think that's really sector specific because it does depend on who's receiving that email, and that's outbound. And there's quite effective AI SDRs or sales development representatives that can reply to emails and get someone on the phone. But like David said, I don't think that they're closing the transaction for larger transactions yet. But there's a lot of outbound and communication via AI in terms of sales that can be effective. Now, I think when it comes to certain subsectors, for example, healthcare services, AI hasn't proven to be very successful in that arena, but in other areas, it really can be.
So it's really that, Amanda. Over the next few years, what business functions do you think will transform the most? Because, for example, in healthcare, there's been a lot of transformation of administrative stuff, less of clinical, but cascading use cases on the clinical side. But in terms of businesses not in healthcare, where do you see sort of the and it's similar to what we were just talking about here, a lot of administrative things versus sales and business development. Where do you see the biggest changes?
I think healthcare's already captured some of this, but a lot of it will be revenue cycle management, a lot of where there's a high amount of data and traditional processes that are already well defined, and margins are compressing, and you really need to implement AI. And I think that's moving along as it should be. There'll be more movement there. When it comes to advisory services or investment banking, a lot of the financial analysis and deal execution, I think, will be more AI generated. And we spoke to that a little bit in the beginning in terms of the need for analysts and whether that will dampen. But a lot of that can be done not more effectively, more quickly now with the use of AI. And I think that will change dramatically. But what will not change is the senior level input and negotiation portion of financial analysts and deal execution. And then strategic planning, I think will morph, because as we were talking about board presentations and spending so much time just developing board material, the more quickly that's able to be implemented with AI, the more time that can be spent on the analysis or the overarching decisions themselves. So I don't think that AI will transform the ultimate decision, but I think the organizations that will be most transformed by it will be those that use it to get to the quality and speed of that decision more quickly. So
right. I mean, to your point, there's nothing worse than sitting through a board deck for 2 hours and not being able to get to the point of what are the 3 or 4 things we really need to discuss. And if
exactly.
you can get there, and then at some point for those 3 to 4 things that really need to be discussed, the AI tools will actually hone that down too, to really give you pros and cons and get you as close as you can to truly using
it. And I think AI can really help simplify the pros and cons of each aspect. And I do want to hop back on to one thing David said, which I think is really important for the listeners here that are just getting started with AI, that AI can help you learn AI and what the benefits are and what other tools that you can use. And that can be really, from the individual level, really effective to start implementing.
No, truly remarkable. And Brett, some of your thoughts there. The places where you'll see either on the sales and marketing side, business development side, or just where you think AI will have the biggest transformative effects in the next few years.
Before I give you a good answer on how to use it more effectively within business development, I wanted to give some caution on what not to use it for, because oftentimes I'm approached by chief revenue officers that have been asked to pull an AI, and their interpretation of how to use it is, in my opinion, wrong. So I kind of have to educate them first before we move into an engagement. I would advise people not to use AI for fully automated outreach without a rep involved. I'm seeing a lot more of that, and with content. And for those that are using AI for content creation a lot, whether it's a blog post or your emails, your email marketing campaigns, the content is becoming very easily detectable that it's AI. And I think we all know the M dashes and all the things, but I'm just seeing people just push it out so quickly without having someone to review it first before it goes out. The other caution to that being, if you have, let's say, Claude or ChatGPT write your email copy, or write your content for LinkedIn, or write your content for your blog post, and you just take it as is, copy and drop it into it, it will recognize the source code being Claude, and it will pick up as spam. So just word to the wise, try not to do that if you're doing any sort of outbound with Claude, because it's the back end of a lot of these email marketing tools is recognizing that it's scraping from Claude. Therefore, it will come through as spam, and you won't actually reach the people that you're trying to access. My second piece.
But Brett, that's some of the limits on this, isn't it? That at the end of the day, to really work with other people on the other side of things, and we're seeing this great growth in live person conferences again, because people really want to actually deal with people. And if you deal with information overload, billions of spam automated messages, that doesn't really move the needle on business development. It sounds good. You're sending out thousands of messages, but nobody really responds to them without direct hand-to-hand involvement.
Right. And, I think that if you use a tool like Perplexity, it can get really great in terms of fine tuning the message and make it almost super personalized for each email. But if you're still just copying and pasting it, it's still going to be recognized on the back end source code that it's spam. For me, because I primarily work with organizations where they have a sales cycle anywhere from 12 to 18 months, I think the best use case right now is better discovery call prep, because enterprise buyers, if you get on a call with them to do an initial discovery call prior to a demo, they're very suspicious if you get on and your reps don't know who they are. They don't know how their business functions. They don't know maybe a recent press release where they've announced some new initiative. So I encourage any sales leader that I'm working with, even if they just pay to do a discovery call with me, how do we create a better prep process for your reps where you're pulling in information on that particular prospect, on the leadership team, on their technology stack, as much information as we can possibly gather on that organization, and distill it down into 5 to 10 validating questions on the discovery call. So when you get on a call with a prospect, you're almost kind of leading the witness to get them to identify the problem that you solve for, using AI to curate those insights for you and generate very specific discovery call documents versus doing like a very scripted, call, which I think a lot of organizations have fallen back to. Because by the end of a discovery call, if you have very curated questions for that organization and you've gotten the responses that you want, you can take that call transcript, and when you do your follow-up or you send your proposal, it's going to feel like you are identifying and addressing all of their problems without them telling that to you. And it helps to accelerate the deal and get you an advocate to help with procurement and move the deal faster through the process, because they feel like you're personally helping them with a win within their enterprise organization.
Well, and if done right, you're talking with somebody with the help of the artificial intelligence prompts and thoughts and questions, so that you really are talking with them about their business versus what you're selling to them. So you could connect a lot deeper by using that kind of prep. And I think that's fantastic. David, Panther Capital, let me wrap up with you. Where do you see business functions being the most transformed over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I'm most excited about is what I don't know. I mean, literally every day, products are coming out. There's computer side AI now. I mean, it's only a few weeks old, but you can actually hand your computer over to Claude or, one of these others, and it'll go in and it'll send your emails for you. I'm personally not ready to give agency to my computer to log into my bank accounts and wire money to one of its agent friends that it finds on the internet, which it will. So I think that, the stuff that excites me the most is the stuff that I haven't seen. It's the advanced stuff. But I think what I'm most tuned into is data governance, data sharing, corporate governance. How are we going to manage all this stuff? What limitations are we going to put on employees, users to access and share their data, the company's data? Because you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And, AI is a data first issue, right? If you're using publicly available data to implement AI, you may be more efficient than you were, a week ago. But unless you have proprietary data, and every business owner does, right? Your financials are proprietary, your operations are proprietary. If you're not using proprietary data, then you're not creating a moat and you're not really creating an AI advantage. And so in conjunction with that, you've got to be really careful about what you feed into OpenAI, Claude, Gemini, all of these features. You've got to decide whether or not you want to set up, MCP servers and vector databases to house all this information, whether you're going to use, retrieval augmented, generation and stuff like that. To me, that's kind of what I'm most excited about, really, is putting the frameworks and the guardrails around this stuff, because I do feel it getting, there's so much opportunity to use it that I'm worried about the abuse.
No, thank you so much. And like you, not ready to turn over the iPad or the computer to AI, to what have you. Fascinating. I want to thank the three of you, and I also want to take a moment to thank our three sponsors today. Thank each of you for joining this panel. David Friedman, Panther Capital, Brett Jansen, always brilliant. Amanda Verner Thompson, also always brilliant. Thank you all three for joining us on the AI panel. Just fantastic. I want to thank our three sponsors today. Panther Capital, you've heard from David Friedman, Com Advisors and Craig Levy, who has traditionally done interim CFO work and just done a brilliant job. And Nathan Freystetter, brilliant founder of GoFig. And we'll hear from Nathan and Craig in our next panel. I want to thank all of you for being sponsors today. Thank you so much. I want to thank the three of you for joining us. Amanda, Brett, David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
Thank
Scott.
you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you so much for listening to the Becker Business and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this.